When my Uncle Silas passed away, the whispers started before his body was even cold. The kind of whispers that carry through kitchens, across dinner tables, down church aisles. Everyone wanted to know who would inherit his fortune. Because Uncle Silas wasn't just wealthy, he was legendary. The kind of man who owned multiple estates, who drove cars most people only ever saw in magazines, who had rumors swirling around about secret investments tucked away all over the country. To the rest of the family, his death didn't just mean loss, it meant opportunity. By the time the will reading came around, my cousins were practically salivating. Roland, the oldest, walked in wearing a suit that screamed confidence. Cynthia, his sister, had that same glint in her eye that people get when they smell money. They were ready to claim their share of Uncle Silas's $35 million estate like it was already theirs. Me? I didn't walk in with that same fire. My mother Mara had raised me to believe that dignity mattered more than money, even if we never had much of either. I worked at the lumber mill. Long hours, rough hands, and just enough to keep the lights on. I didn't dream of mansions or luxury cars, but still, deep down, I hoped my uncle had seen me. Maybe he'd left something meaningful, something that said I mattered. When the lawyer began reading the will, the room fell silent, except for the sound of pens clicking and papers shuffling. Roland, the lawyer read, inherits the lakefront mansion and the collection of antique cars. Roland grinned, leaned back, and gave Cynthia a knowing look. To Cynthia, the lawyer continued, a lifelong trust fund. Her lips curled into a satisfied smile. And then he said my name. To my nephew Eldon, I leave one old metal toolbox, contents unknown. The laughter was instant. Roland threw his head back, almost choking on his smugness. Perfect, he said. The loser gets the junk. Cynthia added, I guess Silas thought you'd be more comfortable with trash than treasure. Their laughter filled the room. I could feel my face burning, but I stayed quiet. I nodded, thanked the lawyer, and walked out with that dented, rusted box clutched in my hands while everyone else left holding deeds, bank statements, and dreams of luxury. Each step I took out of that office felt heavier, not because of the box, but because of the humiliation. The whispers followed me. Poor Eldon. Guess Silas didn't think much of him. Outside, the sun was blinding, but all I felt was small. When I got home, my mother was waiting for me in her rocking chair, her frail hands folded in her lap. She looked up, and that soft smile, the one she always saved for when life hit hardest, warmed the room. What did your uncle leave you, Eldon? She asked gently. I set the toolbox on the kitchen table with a dull thud. This. Just this. She studied it quietly. Her eyes didn't look at the rust or the dents, they looked at me. Do not be ashamed, she said softly. Sometimes the smallest gifts carry the greatest meaning. Her words were kind, but they couldn't cover the sting. All my life, I'd worked hard, done everything right. I'd hoped that maybe, just maybe, Uncle Silas had seen that. Instead, I walked away looking like a fool, mocked by my own family. To understand why it hurt so much, you have to know who Silas was. To most people, he was larger than life, a man who turned dirt into gold. He made his fortune in shipping and real estate, buying up land nobody else wanted, and turning it into empires. He was the kind of man who never bragged, but his very presence made everyone else feel smaller. When I was 10, I watched him stride across the lawn at a family reunion, handing out gifts. Roland got a baseball glove, Cynthia got a bicycle with ribbons on the handlebars, and when he got to me, he just smiled, patted my shoulder, and said, "One day, Eldon, you'll understand that not all treasures shine." Then he walked away. No gift, no explanation, just that. Back then, I thought he'd forgotten me, but now, sitting there in that kitchen, staring at a rusty box, I realized he hadn't. He'd done it again. The next few days were quiet, but not peaceful. That toolbox sat on the kitchen table like a ghost. Every time I passed by, it reminded me of my humiliation. My cousins were probably out celebrating their newfound riches, and I was sitting in a house with peeling wallpaper, helping my mother stretch every dollar. One night, as I scrubbed the dishes, my mother hummed softly, the same tune she always sang when she didn't want me to worry. "You carry too much weight on your shoulders," she said. "Your uncle saw something in you. Maybe this box isn't what it seems." I wanted to believe her, but pride can be heavy. The kind of heavy that seeps into your bones. 3 days after the will reading, I heard a knock on my door. When I opened it, there stood Roland, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine cover. His silk shirt was pressed, his cologne thick in the air. "So, cousin," he said with that smirk that always made my stomach turn, "how's that treasure of yours treating you?" I clenched my jaw. "It's just a toolbox, Roland." He laughed. "That's all you'll ever get, Eldon. Junk for a junk man. You should have seen Cynthia at dinner last night. She almost fell off her chair laughing about you polishing that rusty thing." Before I could say anything, my mother's voice rang out from the living room, still sharp despite her frailty. "Roland, that's enough." He shrugged, tossed me a mocking salute, and strutted off to his car. His laughter echoed down the street as he drove away. I sat down hard at the table, staring at the box. His words shouldn't have mattered, but they did, because I had nothing to prove him wrong. Still, something about that box, it felt wrong. Too heavy, too deliberate. I lifted the lid again. Inside, just a hammer with a splintered handle, a few wrenches, a cracked tape measure. Nothing valuable, nothing meaningful, just tools. But when I lifted the box, I felt it, that strange heaviness again, like something pressed against the bottom. I turned it over, ran my fingers along the underside, and heard a faint rattle. My heart jumped. I told myself I was being foolish, but I couldn't ignore it. I carried it into the bedroom, grabbed a screwdriver, and knelt on the floor. The metal resisted as I pried it open. My hands shook. Sweat rolled down my temple. Crack. The panel gave way. Inside, a small hidden compartment, and in it, an old flip phone. It was dusty, scratched, its antenna bent. My stomach sank. A phone? After all that? But when I pressed the power button, it lit up, and before I could even think, it rang. The sharp, piercing sound filled the room. My breath caught. I stared at the glowing screen. One word flashed: incoming. I froze. Who could possibly be calling this? How could anyone even know it was on? The sound echoed through the silence. Beep, beep, beep. With shaking hands, I flipped it open. "Hello?" Static. Then a voice. Calm. Familiar. "Eldon?" it said. I stopped breathing. Because that voice, that low, deliberate voice, belonged to Uncle Silas. I dropped the phone. It clattered across the floor, the tinny voice still echoing faintly through the static. I grabbed it again, pressed it to my ear. "Uncle?" I whispered. "You found it," the voice said. "Good. That means you're ready." My heart pounded so hard it hurt. "Ready for what?" I demanded. There was a pause, just long enough to make the room feel like it was shrinking around me. "For the truth," he said. "But listen carefully, Eldon. You can't trust them. Not Roland, not Cynthia, not even the lawyer." My blood ran cold. "Why?" I asked, but the line went dead. The screen flickered once and then shut off completely. I sat there in silence, clutching the phone, my mind spinning. Had I imagined it? Was this some kind of twisted recording? Or had my uncle planned something bigger than anyone could guess? The toolbox sat beside me, its false bottom open like a wound, and suddenly, it wasn't just a box. It was a message, a clue. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying his words over and over in my head. You can't trust them. What did that mean? What truth was he talking about? And why did it feel like somehow Uncle Silas wasn't done with me yet? The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy. I made coffee, sat at the table, and stared at the phone. It wouldn't turn on again. The battery was dead, or maybe it had been programmed that way. I pried open the back, looking for anything. Numbers, markings, something. But what I found made my pulse race. Under the battery, tucked into a tiny slot, was a folded piece of paper. On it, coordinates. A location scribbled in my uncle's sharp, familiar handwriting. And beneath it, a single line. Find what I couldn't hide forever. I sat there for a long time, the words burning in my mind. Maybe this was why he left me the toolbox. Maybe this was the real inheritance. Not money, but a secret. One that could change everything. I glanced toward my mother's room. She was still asleep. I didn't want to worry her, not yet. I slipped the paper into my pocket, grabbed my keys, and stepped outside. The morning air was cold, sharp with the smell of pine and rain. The world was quiet, too quiet. As I walked toward my truck, something caught my eye. A dark sedan parked across the street. The same one I'd seen earlier that week. The driver's face was hidden behind tinted glass. I hesitated. For a moment, the engine started, then shut off. I swallowed hard. My uncle's voice echoed in my head. You can't trust them. I climbed into my truck, the coordinates heavy in my hand. The old phone lay on the seat beside me, dark and silent. Somewhere out there, maybe buried in one of his estates, maybe hidden in the woods, maybe right under our noses, Uncle Silas had left something. Something worth guarding. Something worth killing for. As I pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of the sedan's headlights flickering to life behind me. It followed. Slow. Deliberate. And in that moment, I realized this was never about inheritance. It was a game my uncle started long before he died. And now I was in it, whether I wanted to be or not. The road stretched ahead, dark and endless. The coordinates burned in my mind like a brand. Whatever was waiting for me, money, secrets, danger, I knew one thing for sure. The toolbox wasn't a curse. It was an invitation. And somewhere out there, Uncle Silas's final message was waiting to be uncovered. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that opening that box was the first step in unraveling a secret that would tear my family apart. And that voice on the phone, that was only the beginning. Imagine this, your uncle dies, leaving behind a $35 million fortune. Mansions, cars, trust funds, everything a person could dream of. Your cousins walk out of the lawyer's office holding their new lives in their hands, laughing, celebrating, already tasting luxury. And you walk out with a rusty old toolbox. That's it. No mansion, no trust fund, no car, just a dented metal box that looks like it belongs in a junkyard. Everyone's laughing. Your family mocking you like you're the punchline to your uncle's final joke. But what if that box wasn't junk at all? What if inside it, hidden behind the rust and dust, was a secret your uncle wanted only you to uncover? A secret that would change your life forever. My name's Eldon, and this is the story of how my uncle's worthless gift turned into something far greater and far darker than I could have ever imagined. When my Uncle Silas passed away, the whole family buzzed like hornets. He wasn't just rich, he was the kind of man people whispered about in awe. Multiple estates, a fleet of cars, investments spread across half the country. He lived like royalty, and when he died, every one of us thought we were about to inherit a piece of his empire. The day of the will reading felt like Judgment Day. My cousins Roland and Cynthia strutted in wearing designer clothes, practically licking their lips. They already knew they were getting the big stuff. Silas had always favored them. Me? I didn't expect much. My mom, Mara, raised me to believe that dignity mattered more than dollars. I worked hard, lived simply, took care of her after Dad passed away. I wasn't looking for riches. Maybe just a sign. Some small reminder that my uncle saw me. The lawyer began reading. Roland got the lakefront mansion and a collection of antique cars. Cynthia received a trust fund that would keep her rich for life. Their smug smiles filled the room. Then came my turn. To my nephew, Eldon, I leave one old metal toolbox. Contents unknown. Laughter erupted. Roland slapped the table. Cynthia smirked, shaking her head. The loser gets the junk, Roland snorted. Guess Uncle Silas thought you'd be more comfortable with trash than treasure, Cynthia chimed in. The room roared. I kept my face still, swallowed my pride, and accepted the box like it meant nothing. But walking out of that room, holding that dented, rusted piece of metal while my cousins clutched their fortunes, was one of the most humiliating moments of my life. Everyone else was holding the future. I was holding junk. But what none of them knew, what I didn't know, was that the joke wasn't on me. It was on them. When I got home, my mother was waiting. Fragile but warm, sitting in her rocking chair by the window. What did your uncle leave you, Eldon? She asked gently. I set the box down on the table with a dull thud. This, I said bitterly. Just this. She studied it quietly, her eyes soft, kind. Do not be ashamed, she said. Sometimes the smallest gifts carry the greatest meaning. I wanted to believe her, but my pride was raw. I'd spent years working to keep us afloat, taking care of her while my cousins chased money and bragged about failures disguised as success. I had hoped, just once, my uncle would see the difference. But sitting there, staring at that box, I felt invisible, forgotten. It sat on the table for days. I couldn't bring myself to open it. Every time I walked by, I felt a twist of resentment. Maybe it really was just a cruel joke, a reminder of where I stood in the family hierarchy, at the bottom. Then came the knock. Roland. He leaned against my doorframe like he owned the place, his expensive cologne filling the air. So, cousin, he said, smirking, how's that treasure treating you? Found any golden nails yet? My jaw tightened. It's just a toolbox, Roland. He stepped closer, his grin widening. That's all you'll ever get, Eldon. Junk for a junk man. You should have seen Cynthia laughing. She nearly fell out of her chair imagining you polishing that rusted thing. Before I could answer, my mother's voice cut through the air from the other room. Roland, that's enough. Even in her frailty, her tone carried strength. Roland shrugged, gave me a mocking wave, and sauntered back to his car. His laughter echoed down the street. That was the moment I finally cracked. I turned to the box and ripped it open. Inside, just tools. A hammer, a few wrenches, a cracked tape measure. Nothing special. But when I lifted it, it felt too heavy. I ran my hand along the bottom and heard a faint rattle. My heart quickened. I grabbed a screwdriver, wedged it under the metal base, and pried. The metal groaned, resisted, then gave way. Beneath the false bottom was a hidden compartment. Inside, an old flip phone, dusty, scratched. Its antenna bent. I frowned, pressing the power button. To my shock, it lit up. And then, it rang. The shrill tone pierced the silence. My mother appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide. "Answer it," she whispered. My hand trembled as I pressed the green button. "Eldon," a deep voice said on the other end. Calm, steady, deliberate. "If you are hearing this, it means Silas trusted you. The real inheritance begins now." My throat went dry. "Who is this?" "You will know soon enough. Follow the instructions and everything will be revealed. Do not share this with anyone else. The others would not understand. This is between you and the man who knew your worth." Click. The line went dead. I just sat there, frozen. My mother's hand landed on my shoulder. "Eldon, what did they say?" I swallowed. "They said, the real inheritance begins now." Her eyes softened with something between fear and pride. "Your uncle was a complicated man," she said, "but he never did anything without purpose. If he chose you, then there's a reason." That night, I barely slept. The phone lay beside me like a live thing, pulsing with quiet energy. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that voice again. The real inheritance begins now. Was this a gift? A game? A trap? By morning, I knew one thing. Whatever this was, I had to see it through. That evening, the phone rang again. "Eldon," the same deep voice said, "there is a storage facility on the edge of town, Unit 17. The code to unlock it is your father's birthday. Go tonight. Do not tell anyone where you are going." Then, silence. I told my mother what the voice said. She nodded slowly. "If Silas trusted you, then go. But go carefully. Don't let your cousins see you." By 9 that night, I was in my old pickup, toolbox in the back, phone in my pocket. The roads were dark and empty. Every mile felt heavier than the last. The storage facility loomed ahead, rows of metal doors glinting under flickering lights. The gate buzzed open when I entered my high school graduation year into the keypad. Unit 17 waited. I entered my father's birthday. The lock clicked open. The metal door groaned as I lifted it. The air inside smelled of dust and oil. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Shelves, a tarp covering something large, stacks of boxes. But I could feel the weight of purpose in every inch of that room. The phone buzzed again. "You're in the right place," the voice said. "Look beneath the tarp, then read the letter on the desk." I crossed the floor, my boots echoing, pulled the tarp away, and froze. 3 metal crates, each one stamped "Property of S. Halloway." Beside them sat an old desk. On top, an envelope. My name scrawled across it in bold ink. I tore it open. "Eldon," the letter read, "if you're reading this, you have proven yourself. I left the estates and money to your cousins because that's what they wanted. It will ruin them, and I no longer care. You, however, I trust with what truly matters. These crates contain my legacy, not just wealth, but records, maps, and evidence of investments only you can manage. I chose you because you work with your hands, because you live with humility, and because I know loyalty runs in your blood. Protect this. It is your true inheritance." I had to sit down, the words blurred before my eyes. He hadn't mocked me. He'd chosen me. All along, he'd seen me. I looked at the crates again, 3 silent vaults of metal gleaming under the single light. I broke open the first lock with a crowbar. The lid creaked, and there, stacked in perfect rows, were gold bars. Dozens of them. Heavy, real, gleaming like captured fire. The second crate, bundles of cash, crisp and bound. The third, different. Leather journals, maps, keys. Each page in the journals filled with my uncle's handwriting, accounts, coordinates, notes about hidden properties and unknown assets. This wasn't just an inheritance. It was an empire, hidden in plain sight. The phone buzzed again. I answered with trembling hands. I opened them, I whispered. The gold, the cash, the journals. What is all this? The voice was calm. It is your uncle's true fortune, not the flashy wealth he left behind for the greedy. He trusted you to carry the foundation. He believed you would protect it, not destroy it. Why me? I asked. He barely spoke to me. Because he watched you, the voice replied. He saw how you lived, with integrity. He knew you cared for your mother when no one else did. He knew you would not betray him. You were his choice, Eldon, not Roland, not Cynthia. Tears welled in my eyes as I looked at the gold, the journals, the maps. My cousin's laughter no longer hurt. It sounded hollow now. They'd been left with toys. I'd been left with truth. But before I could breathe, headlights sliced through the narrow lane between the storage units. I froze. A sleek car rolled to a stop just yards away. The beam of its light spilled through the slats of the door. Roland's voice echoed in the night. Yeah, he said into his phone. The loser's truck is here. He's hiding something. My pulse thundered in my ears. I ducked behind the crates, clutching the phone, heart hammering so hard I thought he'd hear it through the walls. Roland's footsteps drew closer, each one slower. He wasn't just curious. He knew. And as the sound of metal scraping against metal filled the air, I realized, whatever my uncle had left me, Roland was about to find out the hard way that not all treasure shines, and some is worth killing for. They say every family hides a secret, but I never imagined mine would be locked inside a rusted storage unit under the cover of night, with my name written all over it. When that phone rang the second time, I already knew something was coming. Something that would pull me into a world far beyond anything I'd known. But nothing could have prepared me for what waited behind that steel door. Because the moment I lifted that tarp, my entire life changed. And if I had walked away that night, if I had ignored the call, everything my uncle planned, everything he trusted me to do, would have vanished forever. So when I heard the crunch of gravel behind me and saw Roland's car creeping into the storage lot, headlights slicing through the dark, I knew the secret was seconds away from discovery. My pulse thundered in my ears. I grabbed the phone from my pocket and whispered, barely breathing, "Roland's here. What do I do?" The voice on the other end didn't hesitate. "Lock the unit and leave now. Protect what is inside. Do not let him see it." Every instinct in me screamed to run, but I forced myself to move calmly. I shut the crates, dragged the tarp back over them, and slammed the door closed with trembling hands. My fingers flew across the keypad, my father's birthday, the code that had brought me this far. The lock clicked, the door sealed, and just as I turned, I heard him, Roland's voice cutting through the quiet. "Eldon, I know you're in there. Open up. Let me see what you've got." That voice, that same mocking tone that had haunted every family gathering, the sound of a man who always thought he was better than me. I turned slowly. My heart was racing, but something inside me had changed. For once, I wasn't afraid of him. I walked toward my truck, keeping my steps steady. It's just an old box, Roland," I said, forcing my voice to stay even. "You came all the way out here for nothing." He glared, eyes flicking toward the storage door behind me. "You're lying." I met his gaze, and in that moment, something shifted. For the first time, I wasn't the smaller man in the room. I started the truck, the engine rumbling beneath me. I looked him dead in the eye. "Uncle Silas left me what I needed," I said quietly. "That's all you need to know." The tires crunched against the gravel as I pulled away, leaving Roland standing there, angry, confused, powerless. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, adrenaline burning through me, but there was a strange, powerful calm rising too. I had protected it. Whatever this inheritance really was, it was safe. For now. When I got home, my mother was waiting at the window. The second she saw my face, she didn't ask a single question. She just looked at me the way only a mother can, like she already knew everything. "You've found it, haven't you?" she whispered. I nodded. The weight of the night crashed down on me all at once. She reached out, placed her hand on mine. "Then you must carry it wisely. That is what your uncle wanted." Her words echoed in my head long after I went to bed that night, because it hit me. This wasn't just about gold or journals or money. It was about trust, about legacy, about a man who had seen something in me when everyone else saw nothing. For the first time in my life, I understood. The real inheritance wasn't what you hold, it's what you're trusted with. The next morning, my mother noticed the change before I did. She studied me across the table, her tea steaming between us. "Your father always believed you were made for more than this small life," she said. "I think Silas believed the same." I nodded, the letter still in my hand. "He left me something real, Ma, not what Roland and Cynthia wanted, something I have to protect." She smiled softly, pride glimmering behind her tired eyes. "Then protect it and use it to do good. That's the only way wealth means anything." Her words became my compass. Days passed. I went back to the storage unit, always after dark, always alone. I cataloged everything, the gold bars stacked like bricks of sunlight, the bundles of cash sealed in wax paper, the leather-bound journals filled with my uncle's handwriting. Those journals, they were his mind on paper. Plans, maps, ideas, even confessions. He wrote about betrayal, about greed, about watching people he loved turn into strangers for the sake of money. He wrote about me too, in small, quiet lines. Words I'll never forget. Open quote, "Eldon works with his hands. He builds, he listens, he endures. He's not like the others. He remembers what matters." Close quote. When I read that, I had to stop. My throat tightened. For years, I thought I was invisible to him, but all that time, he had been watching. The more I read, the more I realize this was never about wealth. It was a test. My uncle wanted to know who could be trusted to carry the fire, not just spend it, and he had chosen me. Meanwhile, my cousins began to notice. Roland stopped by uninvited again, his voice dripping with false politeness. "You've been quiet lately, cousin. Too quiet. What are you hiding?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I'm not hiding anything, Roland. I'm just living my life." He sneered. But behind that arrogance was doubt. He could feel the change in me. The weakness he used to feed on was gone. A week later, Cynthia called. Her tone was all poison and sugar. "Don't tell me you actually think Uncle Silas loved you enough to leave anything valuable. He thought you were pathetic." Her words didn't sting anymore. I just smiled to myself and said, "Believe what you want, Cynthia. I know the truth." And that truth gave me peace. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't need to prove myself. Not to them. Not to anyone. While they showed off their estates and shiny cars, I was doing something different. I was building. Quietly. Purposefully. I paid off my mother's medical bills. I helped repair the local church roof that leaked every winter. I funded the community center that kept kids off the streets, the same place that had given me warmth when I was a boy, with nothing but calloused hands and big dreams. Each act reminded me that wealth means nothing if it doesn't lift someone else up. And with every choice, I felt my uncle's presence. Like he was still guiding me. Still watching. Roland and Cynthia, though, they couldn't stand it. They saw the calm in me and mistook it for arrogance. They started whispering, accusing, speculating. They thought I'd stumbled onto some hidden fortune they'd missed. In truth, they weren't wrong, but they'd never understand the kind of fortune I'd found. One evening, Roland stormed into my workshop, red-faced and furious. "Enough games, Eldon. Tell me the truth. What did Silas really leave you?" I wiped my hands on a rag and looked him dead in the eye. "He left me something you'll never understand." He blinked. "And what's that?" "Trust." The word hung between us like thunder. He didn't know what to say. For once, Roland, the man who always had the last word, just stood there, speechless. Then he turned and left. I watched him go, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt pity, because no amount of money could buy what he had lost. Months passed, and my life transformed. I was no longer the man who sat humiliated at that will reading. I was no longer the forgotten nephew. I was the keeper of a legacy. The toolbox, once a symbol of shame, now sat proudly in my living room. I kept it not for what it once contained, but for what it meant. It reminded me that the world's greatest treasures often come disguised in ordinary forms, and that sometimes the smallest key can open the largest door. Late one night, I sat in the storage unit again, the hum of the fluorescent light above me, the smell of oil and dust thick in the air. I opened one of my uncle's journals and found a page I hadn't seen before. There were numbers, coordinates, and a final line that sent chills through me. Open quote, "If you're reading this, Eldon, you've only uncovered the first layer. The rest waits where our family began." Close quote. I stared at the page, my pulse quickening. The first layer? I looked around the unit, the gold, the journals, the fortune, and realized this wasn't the end. it was only the beginning. The phone on the desk buzzed again, lighting up the dark with that familiar green glow. My hand hovered over it, my breath unsteady. I answered. The same deep voice spoke, calm, deliberate. "Eldon, you've done well. Now it's time to finish what your uncle started." My grip tightened around the phone. "What do you mean?" A pause. Then the voice replied, low and certain. "Look beneath the floorboards. And remember, not everything that glitters is gold." The line went dead. The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at the floor beneath my feet, the same floor I'd stood on dozens of times, and for the first time I noticed something I hadn't before, faint markings carved into the concrete. My heart began to pound. Whatever was hidden beneath that floor, it wasn't just treasure. It was the next step in a journey my uncle had planned long before I ever lifted that toolbox lid. And as the night deepened, I realized my inheritance hadn't just changed my life. It was about to change everything. Because sometimes the greatest legacies aren't the ones we're given. They're the ones we're chosen to uncover. And somewhere beneath that cold concrete, I could feel it. The story wasn't over.